Hey everybody, I thought I'd do a quick update here. Currently, I am working on videos for Palmer and Pyro. That'll be done together because the two are very intertwined with each other. I'm also working on a Italary. I'm trying to get some more information on Atoms and Snap and UPC. That'll be a 3-in-1 video because basically Snap and UPC just bought Atoms' old molds. I'm collecting information for Johan. I've got one for Otaki, but there's not a lot of information there. I did find a couple of good websites with a lot of detailed history on Strombecker, but it'll take a while to get that written. I've had requests to look into Wingnuts and Great Wall, Ryefield, and Airfix. There's a rumor floating around that Wingnuts is no longer in business, so I got to look into that. And I really don't have any information on Ryefield or Great Wall. And as I said before, I was holding off on Airfix because there's a couple of really good, very thorough videos about them already. I'll see if I can find one to put the link below. In the comments section, and this is translated from Cyrillic, but I believe it's the Standard Bearer of Eternity. He's a journalist in Russia, and he said he was proud to be the first. This is talking about Zvezda. He said he was proud to be the first journalist to interview Konstantin Krivenko back in 1993 for a Russian hobby magazine. And they were still in their old place in Moscow. Well, anyway, apparently he said that the founder, Konstantin Krivenko's father, had worked in the West back in the old Soviet era and used to send his son plastic armor kits, mostly Tamiya, and a company called Kostya that I have never heard of. And that was back in the 1970s. And apparently that made him a very fortunate kid because most Russian kids, I see the cat wants attention. Most kids back in Russia, their only option was a company called Ogenvox. And I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. Ogenvox. And they had a rather interesting 1 to 30 scale line of kits. Well, anyway, from the very beginning of the foundation of the company, Krivenko had wanted to do plastic model tanks and the like and armored vehicles. So he'd wanted to be in the plastic kit market. But when they first started Zvezda, unless you have a lot of money, you don't just jump into the kit market business. So they started making rather simple plastic items like the little squares, the little crosses you use for laying tile, and plastic forks for garden plants until they collected enough money to start tooling World War II infantry. And so they worked their way up the hard way to make. Then that explains why their stuff has continue to get better and better with time. Sadly, Konstantin passed away in 2014. He was only 51 years old, but the people at the company apparently very highly motivated, and which is evident by the quality of the product they put out. And they all pulled together to help his widow keep the business running. So luckily they're doing well and getting better. So I just thought that was some interesting additional information. I would love to have had that before I got started, because that would have made a nice addition. I got one from John K. Says, thanks, Max, but did you know the 148 scale full interior military kits Bandai produced were licensed by Monogram for production, but the molds were lost at sea when the transport ship sank? No, I did not know that. I'd never heard any. That's another one of those things that's just really incredibly interesting. I hope everybody got off safely. Wow. Anybody has any more details on that? That'd be an interesting thing to learn about. Just to touch back on the old rabbit hole video, clean up one little point for those who are not aware. Back in 62 or 63, the famous illustrator Jack Linwood had done Aurora's KC-135 artwork. And when he painted the picture, did the illustration, the 135 didn't have a tail boom. And there were a couple of F-86s following behind it. And, of course, it didn't really matter that he didn't have a tail boom because the F-86s did not have an aerial refueling capability. Well, the box said KC-135 on it, so we went with that. But I'd pointed that out because just making a little joke about it, and somebody had showed me a picture of a F-86 over Edwards Air Force Base, hooked up to a KB-29 with a fixed with a temporary test receptacle in the nose. If you look at that F-86, you'll notice there's no guns on it. All the gun ports are sealed up. So they pulled out the analog computer and the ranging radar and everything to put room for that receptacle. Anyway, the point I was trying to make is that apparently Aurora just had Jack Linwood use the old 707 material to redo the artwork to do the KC-135. So, of course, it didn't have the tail boom on it. But I was informed by some people that the model kit actually did have the tail boom. It was included in the kit. And that got me wondering, okay, why would they do this artwork 5 years after the airplane's been in service when there should be plenty of easy-to-obtain source data? And apparently, you have to remember that guys like Linwood were commercial illustrators. They worked very quickly. Sometimes they would crank these illustrations out in just a day or two. And from what I can gather, and of course I'm piecing this together from little bits of information you get here and there, but it appears that Linwood was contracted to do the artwork, but Aurora just wanted their box top. They weren't really interested in updating the image, so they just told him, just use what you got on hand. We sent you the stuff for the 707. Just use that and paint it up in military markings and get it to us as quick as you can. And as a quick side note, because a lot of people are sending me information about the C-135, the KC-135. Yes, I know. 1958, both aircraft were produced for the Air Force, so there were both variants, but the box specifically said KC-135, which is what led me to poke fun at it. But anyway, that whole thing just turned into a real rabbit hole. I decided, since I was getting a few comments on it, I decided to address it, and it took on a life of its own. And it's funny to think that when I was 2 years old, some corporate executive talked to an artist, made a quick judgment. Well, just use what you got, do it quick, and get it to us. And then, now 60 years later, we're still talking about it. So, you never know. Anyway, on to new business. I've gotten a lot of requests from people, or just queries about, where do you get all this information, or how do you find this stuff out? Well, the first thing is, normally, if it's at all possible, I try to use books. The reason Monogram, Revell, and Aurora were so detailed was because I have the books by Thomas Graham. And that really makes things go a lot easier. But outside of the few companies that have had books written about them, you pretty much get stuck using internet sources. And normally the first thing I'll do when I pick a company is, the simplest thing is just to get a high altitude overlook of the company is to Google search, and half the time it's just a Wikipedia article. And you start with that, and then you go down to the sources below, and a lot of times if it's not a dead link, the resource material in there will flesh things out a little bit. Then you follow up by going to ScaleMates, because it's an incredible repository of information on not only how long what the box art was on a certain year or when the kit went into production, but also where the molds went if the company folded. Another great source is Box Art Den, and sometimes they have some articles in there that can help flesh out a few things. Old Model Kits is another good one. If I stumbled onto a website, I guess you would call it, called Fandom, that has some brief histories on a couple of companies. They were the only ones that had any history on Otaki, and but sometimes you find threads on Fine Scale Modeler, Modeling Madness, or one of the model websites. It takes a lot of scouring the internet to find this stuff. One of the best sources is feedback from viewers. An example, one of the dangers of using Wikipedia, there's two big dangers. One, the information tends to be dated. That's what happened with the Accurate Miniatures. I only found a few sources online, including the Wikipedia page on Accurate Miniatures and a couple of threads, and they didn't have a website, which should have been a red flag. The gotcha there was everything I found on Accurate Miniatures used the present tense, and I bought an Accurate Miniatures model at a hobby shop not too long ago, so I had no reason to think that they had ceased operations until a viewer sent me a comment and said, I think they stopped. And then I did something I should have done before that. I got a little slack there, and I went to Modeling Madness, and sure enough, there were no new kits introduced after 2010. Between that and no website, so then I went to the Secretary of State for North Carolina and looked up the parent company, and sure enough, it had been dissolved. And putting two and two together, I was like, I'm not sure they're still around. That's why I put version 2 up. I had to update that. And if anybody, again, has any information on that, let me know. In fact, there's another danger of using a Wikipedia. Sometimes it is just the only thing you can find. But Andrea M. said, I'm sorry to say that, but I find your SG history a point-to-point rescript of what you can read on Wikipedia, just completed with illustrations. And in fairness, he's not wrong. About 70% of what was on the Eschi video did come out of the wiki page, because that page was particularly thorough and well constructed. All I had to do was rescript it, and okay, that goes out, that stays in, add this from another article, move this around over here. So he's not entirely wrong on that one, but I was very fortunate that I happened to have a good source, the wiki page. So I've heard people make that complaint before, and one of the things that happens sometimes is you run around to different articles and you find out they're cut and paste from the wiki, or maybe wiki was a cut and paste from the article, but you find you stumbling on the exact same verbatim information over and over again. And in that particular case, that with the exception of a couple of websites that had some additional information that I included, they're not entirely wrong. So you take the information where you can get it, and that's all I could find. But other times, there's nothing. Atoms, Snap, UPC, not a thing. So you wind up digging through the threads. There isn't one place you go. It's just you keep digging till you find enough, and if you don't find much, then you wind up with a very short video. The whole thing with the music at the end, that's just me having fun. I don't monetize these things. It's strictly a labor of love, and that's just a little, self-aggrandizement, tongue-in-cheek, poking humor. It's my guilty pleasure. Now, one thing I want to ask everyone out there about, because I've been getting a lot of good information in the comment section on videos that were long since made, was if you have some information on Atoms, which sold their stuff to Snap, which sold their stuff to UPC, I'd love to hear it. Same for Johann, Otaki, Strombecker, Wingnuts, Great Wall, Ryefield, Palmer and Pyro. I've got most of that down. I found a couple of very informative websites, not Wikipedia. Well, actually, I take that back. Some of the stuff on Palmer did come from Wiki, but a lot of it, especially on Pyro, I was able to actually find some websites that were probably written by people that worked at the company. Please send it to me. Also, you can reach me on Facebook if you want to send a message or something. And also, if you have more information on any of the things I've already done, like Accurate Miniatures, just Max Conkey, you can message me on Facebook or make a post. I'll get up with you. I don't check Facebook that often, but I will make contact. It's all about trying to collect and organize data and find images. A lot of times you can't find the right picture, so you just stick something in there that looks similar. And, I'm a guy working from his house and sitting out the current times like everybody else. As Burt Gummer would have said, doing what I can with what I got. Hope you guys are enjoying it. I'll keep them company. I'll keep them coming. And, of course, I started putting countdowns at the end, so if you don't want to hear or waste time with my musical self-expression, then, you get a chance to click off there. And that's everything for right now. So, guys, take care, be safe, and we will see everybody out in the interweb. Just because I can, I'm going to add a musical section to this one, because that's how I roll.
I know that something very strange has happened to my brain. I'm either feeling very good or else I am insane. The seeds of doubt you planted have started to grow wild, and I feel that I must yield before the wisdom of a child. And it's love you bring, know that I can't deny. And with your wings, I can learn to fly, sweet young thing. People try to talk to me, their words are ugly sounds. I resist all their attempts to try and bring me down. Turned on to the sunset like I've never been before. I'll listen for your footsteps and you'll knock upon the door. And it's love you bring, know that I can't deny. With your wings, I can learn to fly, sweet young thing.